السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. كيف حالكم جميعا؟ How's everyone? Hope everyone's good inshallah. Can everyone hear me properly? حياكم الله، أهلا وسهلا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله رب العالمين، صلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أهلا وسهلا، حياكم الله وبياكم. Alhamdulillah, it's good to be back after a long break, which in essence was because of an issue that I had, that I still have, Allah al-Musta'an, which is got some problem with my hand. Um, I suppose during the vocabulary challenge, I think I overdid it, overworked myself a little bit, and seems to be some kind of, I don't know, something like some kind of maybe nerve compression or something. So doctor told me to have a 2-week break, which is not easy for me. But Alhamdulillah, I'm taking it easy, try and give it some time to recover, because obviously most of my work is on the laptop, using the mouse and the keyboard, which قدر الله ما شاء فعل, I can't do much of right now. It's one of the reasons why this lesson took so long to actually happen, because I wanted to prepare some stuff, but I'm working at 20% capacity. Don't really know how to type with my left. So that's why the delay. And also, not just a delay for today's session, but it's going to be a delay as well in the grammar challenge, this actual start of the challenge, because again, doctor told me to have a 2-week break. The week's not still got another week left. Alhamdulillah, it's getting better now, but if I don't take it easy, then it might get worse again. But however, today's session, I'm very excited for today's session. To be honest, today's session is what I was looking to do or present last time when we had the first session. But that session, I'll be honest with you, I've been teaching for almost 2 years, and that session, I don't know if you guys have noticed, maybe some of my long-term students must have noticed, I was completely unprepared, and that's because of this issue and other issues. So I didn't really get time to prepare what I want to prepare. So now, even though it took a long time and I had to do a little bit every day, today, alhamdulillah, I can say that it's not 100% ready, but I do have something, inshallah ta'ala, for you today that hopefully at the end of the session, you will agree with me that it was worth the wait. طيب. طيب. So today's session has the same title as last time, which is Mastering Arabic Grammar Made Easy. And what I'm going to share with you today is a framework which is a result of almost a decade of reading, planning, teaching, and ideas. Okay, framework's not ready. However, it's not 100% ready, but the overall, what I call the Arabic grammar map, we're almost there. Now, today I'm going to present it to you. I'll try my best to explain it. I try to create some learning resources or some things that make it easier for me to present. It's not easy. It's not straightforward. If you haven't learned Arabic grammar before, it might sound a bit complicated. However, I want you to trust me, inshallah, that this framework will be highly beneficial for anyone who wants to learn Arabic, inshallah. Now, of course, there's a lot of work left. The exercises, because as you know, for me, learning grammar and learning Arabic, generally speaking, as you know, the most important aspect about it is implementation and practice, interactive exercises. But of course, when the framework is ready, then you can create the exercises that go hand in hand with that. Okay? طيب. So it's a very high level overview. Very high level overview. I'm gonna try my best not to go into detail because I know if I go into detail, this session will take a very long time. And it's already late for me, and I'm sure it's late for some of you as well. So I'm gonna try and be as concise as possible. So the Arabic grammar map, for lack of a better term, you guys can come up with a good name for it, inshallah, if you want. It's all about sentences, as you can see. It's all about the Arabic sentence. Because the way that I believe grammar should be learned is that you learn grammar by acquainting yourself and practicing with the different uh, sentences that you might come across. Now, I don't know how many of you have some kind of background in linguistics or whatever, but there is this famous framework or ideology, if you like, called transformative grammar by some linguistic scholar called Noam Chomsky. And basically, the idea behind it is that, and he's talking about English. And the funny thing is, actually, before he became a linguist, he learned some Arabic, which I believe made him the linguist he is, because Arabic is really a systematic language, more systematic than English. But basically, the idea behind it is that whatever sentence you come across that can be spoken or written, okay, by way of grammar, there's a way to actually kind of generate it in a way. But more importantly, all these sentences, they go back to, so what he calls deep structure. In other words, there is a very basic structure for all sentences, which then can be expanded and more detail can be added. Okay. And I think a lot of people, they find grammar difficult because they look at grammar and they try to grasp all the details right from the beginning, and they get lost. Okay. So I want to take you back to the basics. Okay. What's an Arabic? What's a jumla or a sentence in Arabic? What does it consist of? What's the bare minimum? Okay. And then what can we add to that sentence in order for it to make more sense, or in order for it to achieve its objective? Because all of you know that we speak and we write and we express ourselves for certain communicative purposes. There's something in our mind that we want to communicate, we want to share with others. So we try to put that in words, either in writing or by saying it. That's when it comes to expression. Or sometimes we want to comprehend and understand what another person is trying to say. Okay? Either his writing or the other person's speech, especially the Quran and the Sunnah, for example. It's all about understanding what Allah has said. Okay? So this is the whole purpose of you learning Arabic. This is the whole purpose of communication. This is the whole purpose why we are here. Okay? To be able to understand what somebody means with a speech. Okay? Well, there. So that's why it's important to go to the core and then figure out what's extra and what's not. على أي حال, let's get into it right away. Now, last time I shared with you and I said to you that in terms of Arabic sentence types, there are only two types. We have, let me go to the screen. Where is it? Okay. So we have what we call jumla ismiya, nominal sentences, and we have verbal sentences, jumla fi'liya. We're talking about more detail, and I'm going to actually show you a lot of examples, inshallah. But a jumla ismiya is basically a sentence that starts with a noun. And a noun, as you know, it could be a person, it could be a thing, it could be an idea, just something that exists. Okay? And such a nominal sentence, then you're basically saying this is that. So that's a statement you're making. So you can say, for example, the weather is hot. Okay? Or the teacher is late. Okay, so this is what they call equational sentence. So المدرس متأخر, الجو حار, and so on and so forth. So you basically have a subject, something you want to talk about, and then you say something about it. This is that. Or you might actually put it as a verb. And when would you have a verbal sentence? Now, what you need to know is that the origin is the nominal sentence, right? The verbal sentence, we use it for specific reasons. We use it if there's an action that has took place or is taking place or will take place. In other words, if there's an action with a specific tense involved. Okay? So as you know, actions they happen at a specific place at a specific time, right? And every action has a doer. Okay? Now, if that has happened and we want to communicate that, that's when we would use a verbal sentence. Okay? Now that's what we've covered last time. Going on to today's um if you like, topic, right? Or what we're going to add to that today. Today, we're going to add to that what we call sentence function. Very important. Sentence function. And let me share another screen so you can see what I'm looking at. Bismillah. Okay, so we have this. Okay, so we talked about sentence type. We have nominal sentences, we have verbal sentences. Example, Sa'idun Muslimun. Sa'id is a Muslim. Now in Arabic, we don't write the word is. We'll talk about that later. That's detail. But Sa'id, Muslim. Sa'id is a Muslim. Okay. Now, if you want to actually mention that Sa'id became a Muslim, right? So now you have something that took place, an action at a specific tense, all right? As in he became Muslim. Not he's going to become Muslim in the future. Alhamdulillah, he's already Muslim. He became Muslim, right? Then you would say Aslama Sa'idun. Aslama Sa'idun. And I on purposely decided to use the same word, one in a what happened there? Where do we go? Oh, yeah, one of them is in the form of a noun and the other one is in the form of a verb, but it's the same meaning basically. So the same meaning apart from the fact that Sa'id is a Muslim, there's no tense involved. That's what he is. We're not saying he was Muslim yesterday or he's Muslim now or he will become Muslim in the future. No, no, no. That's what he is. He is Muslim, right? So there's no tense involved. Okay? Now, if there's a tense involved, you say Aslama Sa'idun. Now, those are the sentence types. Now, I want to talk to you about what we call sentence functions. Okay? And this is really important. And this is what today, the first thing that we want to get across, which is, and this might sound shocking to you, right? But pay attention. And probably not just Arabic, all languages. Yes. You can say that whatever sentence you come across, it is going to fulfill one of three functions. It's for one of three reasons. Okay? Now that is any sentence. As I speak to you now, everything that I say during this session is going to fall into one of these three categories. If you open the Quran and you read the Quran, every ayah you come across is going to have sentences or clauses that belong to one of these three groups. Now that's refreshing, isn't it? To be able to condense the whole Arabic language into three categories. Naam, not just the words, I'm talking about actual sentences. The whole all of the clauses, all of the sentences can fall into one of these three things, which are statements. Yes. All right. And like I said, that statement could be a verbal or nominal. It could be both. Right? It could be both. Your statement, the thing that you're saying, you could be talking about someone being something, or you can mention something that happened. Or they could be questions, right? So you're not making a statement, but you're asking a question, and then the person you're asking the question will answer you accordingly. Or it could be that you are making a request. Okay? Now, each one of these three have two subcategories. So when it comes to statements, each statement that you make can either be affirmative statement or a negative statement, as in you can say something is such and such, or you can say it is not. Okay? Now, before we talk about the subcategories, I want you to contemplate on this verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وتمت كلمة ربك صدقا وعدلا. وتمت كلمة ربك صدقا وعدلا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. um, لا مبدل لكلماته هو السميع العليم. Allah says that, and the word of your Lord has been fulfilled in truth and in justice. None can change his words, and he is the all-hearer, the all-knower. And Imam al-Sa'di, he mentions in tafsir of this ayah, in explanation of this ayah, وتمت كلمة ربك صدقا في الأخبار وعدلا في الأحكام. He says that the word of your Lord has been fulfilled in truth when it comes to statements, and in justice when it comes to rulings. Okay, now those are basically two of these three categories that we've mentioned. Okay, so all of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words in the Quran are either statements, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about his statements, he says, وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ قِيلًا, who is more truthful than Allah in speech or in words. So everything in the Quran, all the statements that Allah has made in the Quran, they are all true. Yes, so these statements could be anything. Um, Things that have happened, past tense, as in stories of those before us, things that are happening now, things in the future, anything about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's perfect names and attributes, any universal truth, such as Islam being the religion of truth, or anything. All these are statements. And all of these akhbar, we have to believe in them. And this all goes to this is all related to the field of aqidah. Okay? So everything in the Quran that we believe in, all the statements, this is aqidah. And then Imam Sa'd says, sidqan wa adlan, and justice in ahkam, he says, in rulings. Which means the other half of the Quran are rulings. Now rulings are, what we've mentioned here, rulings are the requests, which are either commands or prohibitions. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to do things in the Quran, and he has prohibited us from doing things in the Quran. And this is what we call the rulings, the ahkam. So the whole Quran and all of Allah's statements, like I said, can be one of two categories. Now one of you might say, Ustaz, so what's the third category then? You said that there are three categories. Now, look, in Arabic they say that all of speech is either khabar or insha. Either khabar or insha, which is the two categories that we've mentioned. They're either statements or what they call insha. What is insha? Insha is basically, it's not a statement, but it is something, okay, pay attention. It is something that somebody says in order to induce something, in order to extract something or make something happen. What do I mean by that? For example, insha is these two things, questions and commands. These are insha. So when you ask somebody a question, what are you doing? You're basically extracting a statement from them. Okay? Which could be a nominal statement, as in you might say to him, Aina Sa'id, where's Sa'id? He might say to you, Sa'idun fil bayt. So that's a question. A question is insha. You're extracting. You're making something happen. Right? Or it could be a request whereby you're not extracting a statement, but you're extracting you're inducing the actual action. So when you say to someone, kul, eat, for example, what are you doing? You're trying to make that verb happen or the action happen whereby that person he eats. So this is language. Language is either to inform or to persuade. Right? So these two are insha and this one is khabar. So when we said earlier the ayah in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made two categories, then the second category includes these two, both of them. But why has this verse not mentioned questions? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, he doesn't ask us anything in the Quran. There are no questions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-knower. Okay, so even though questions are included in the Arabic language and we use them, yes, when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statements, then you'll only find questions if these are questions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is relating and telling us about others having asked those questions. Like Fir'aun, for example, asking Musa a question. Now that's not, of course, Allah asking us a question, but that is a statement. Allah is saying, وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنَ يَا Musa, that Fir'aun said to Musa, or Fir'aun asked Musa, and so on and so forth. So those obviously are all statements. So Allah Ta'ala doesn't ask us anything in the Quran, as in doesn't seek information from us, because questions in this context is seeking information. Okay, so all of speech, again, to go back to what we're talking about, either they are statements or questions or requests. These statements could be affirmative statements or negative statements. Okay, so here we have 4 sentences. Okay, so it's basically a third of the language, if you like, a third of the Arabic language. So we have the nominal sentences and the verbal sentences for both affirmative and negative statements. So, example affirmative statement, we already mentioned, Sa'id is a Muslim, or Sa'id became Muslim. And if you want to make it negative, then you add something to it. This is now one of the first transformations that we're talking about. Remember what I said earlier, transformative grammar is basically when you take a sentence, you add something to it and you transform it, you make it into something else. So as you can see, this is the starting point. Okay, and everything else that comes after it is just a transformation that that sentence went through in order to achieve these functions and these objectives. So let's say you have a statement. Sa'id is a Muslim. You want to negate that statement. You say, Laysa Sa'idun Musliman. Allah protect us. Okay, Laysa Sa'idun Muslim. That's how you would negate this statement. Okay. So someone might say, for example, Al-Jawu Baridun. You want to say no. لا. ليس الجو باردا. You negate it that way. Okay. Or you might want to negate a verbal sentence, such as Sa'id became Muslim. You might want to say no, you're mistaken. ما أسلم سعيد. Sa'id did not become a Muslim. واضح? So those are statements. We're done with statements. Okay. Now all of the language, again, like I said, this is about a third of the language. Okay. A third of the language is here right in front of you. Yes, either affirmative statements or negative statements. خلاص? Okay. Now let's go to the second third. The second third of the language is questions. These questions might be posed to you, or you might pose these questions. Now, these questions can be one of 2 types. They can either be closed-ended questions, or they can be open-ended questions. And we talked about these things before. I don't want to go into much detail. We talked about it in the Arabic conversational course, and we'll talk about it in more detail later. But what's really the difference between a closed-ended question and open-ended question? Well, some they want to define it by saying, oh, a closed-ended question, the answer to it is yes or no. And an open-ended question, the answer to it is open. Okay, that's fine. But actually, a much better way of thinking about it is this. A closed-ended question is when you already have the information, you just want to affirm it and get an affirmation for it, or you want someone to negate it. That's it. Yani, I already know, or I've heard, that Sa'id became Muslim. Okay, but I'm not sure. So I have the information, but I'm not sure. So I say, هل سعيد مسلم? Is Sa'id a Muslim? Okay, so I have a complete sentence. That's the biggest difference between closed-ended question and open-ended question. A closed-ended question, we have a complete sentence and we put the word hal in front of it so that the person we're talking to can either say na'am or la. So come up with any sentence that you like. Okay, like, okay, I'm teaching you right now, sah? I started teaching. Okay, so بدأ المعلم الدرس. The teacher started the class. Okay, now let's say someone walks into the room, knew that I was going to be teaching today, has the complete sentence already, which is بدأ المعلم الدرس, but he wants confirmation. So he asks you, هل بدأ المعلم الدرس? To which you will answer نعم or لا. Now, if you say نعم, then that's basically a repeat of that's basically followed by an affirmative statement, but you don't say it because there's no need. Okay, so هل بدأ المعلم الدرس؟ نعم بدأ المعلم الدرس. But you don't need to repeat the whole sentence. نعم takes its place. نعم basically means whatever you said, yes. Repeat it, it's correct. If you say لا, then basically what you're saying is whatever you said, negate it. No. So لا. ما بدأ المعلم الدرس. The teacher did not start the class. But obviously when it comes to answering the question, we can suffice with yes or no because the answer is understood from the question. So the la is in context to what you've asked. Okay, it's a la to your question or a na'am to your question. That's why na'am and la by themselves they don't have a meaning, but they have a meaning if they are used in order to answer a question. Now, that's the closed-ended question. How about the open-ended question? The open-ended question is basically when it's when you have a gap in the information that you have. There's a gap. All right. So you have some of the information, but you're missing some parts of the crucial information that you need to know. So, for example, you know about someone called Saeed, but you don't really know who he is, right? You've heard the name Saeed. Okay. So you can't say anything about Saeed, but you want someone else to talk to you about Saeed. You say to them, Man Saeedun? Who is Saeed? Then, of course, that person can say Saeedun, Rajulun, Muslimun, and he can continue and say a lot of things. Man Saeed. Here you know Saeed, but you don't know much about him. Or, for example, you know that Saeed became a Muslim. You have that information. Aslama Saeed, you know about it. But you want to know when he became a Muslim. So you say, Mata Aslama Saeedun. So that's an open-ended question. So these question words that we use for open-ended questions, each word corresponds to a certain part of the sentence. Now, this is amazing if you contemplate on this, right? Let me give you a complete sentence. Let's say I'm going to give you Saeed's full biography. So let's say, Aslama Saeedun, Saeed became a Muslim, يوم الجمعة, Friday, في المسجد النبوي, in the Prophet's mosque. Okay? واضح? So now what have I given you? And let me tell you also why he became Muslim. حبا لله, out of the love of Allah. Okay, so I gave you a full sentence, right? So I told you that he became Muslim. That's the first piece of information, the main part of it. I told you why he became Muslim, when he became Muslim, where he became Muslim. Now, every piece of information that I've given you, if I did not give you that information and you wanted to ask for it, then there's a specific word that corresponds to it. So if you want to ask when, you say mata. If you want to ask where, you say aina. If you want to ask why he became Muslim, you say limada. If you want to ask how he was when he became Muslim, you say kaifa. I might say to you, masruran, he became Muslim happily. Okay? Or taw'an, he became Muslim willingly. Okay? Not karhan, which is by force. He became Muslim taw'an. Okay? So that tells you how he became Muslim. Okay? So this is what we mean by questions. Okay? So questions, again, is when you have a statement, right, that you have in your head. You can either seek affirmation or negation for the statement, or you have some of the information and you want to fill in the gaps. Okay? But both of these two types, closed-ended and open-ended questions, what do? They extract statements from someone else. That's why they're called insha. Okay, they themselves are not statements. A question is not a statement. If you ask a question, nobody can ascribe a statement to you. If I say to you, for example, yes, is Islam the true religion? If I ask that question, مثلا, nobody can say to me that Muhammad doesn't believe Islam is a true religion just because I posed that question. A question is not a statement. And I might have posed that question for multiple reasons. Maybe I'm asking someone else I'm arguing with. Maybe it's a question that I'm posing that the objective behind it is to establish something. Sometimes you ask a question, you state the obvious. Like Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, أَإِلَهٌ مَعَ اللَّهِ, is there a deity besides Allah? Now that's not a question. That's a statement. The reason behind it is a statement, but isn't a form of a question. واضح? طيب. Then we have requests. So linguistically, again, that's a question. But again, there's levels of language. You have grammar, and then you have balagha, which is the meanings behind the grammar. We'll get to that later. Today, we're just talking about grammar. Okay, then finally, we have requests. Now, again, like I said, requests is when you want something to happen. That's why you can't make a request. You can't command or prohibit something by using a nominal sentence, by using nouns. You can't do that. Because requests you want an action to happen. So there has to be a verb involved. So there are no, this is empty. Okay, this doesn't exist. So requests always start with a verb. So let's say you want to say to Sa'id, become Muslim. You say to him, Aslim. Or you can say the opposite. You can prohibit him by saying, La tuslim. Now, I could have obviously used the opposite. I could have said, La takfur. But I just wanted to keep everything the same in these sentences to show you the differences. But of course, nobody would say to someone, don't become a Muslim. Okay? But these are just for the sake of education and for the sake of keeping everything the same. I try to keep everything the same so you notice the difference. Aslim, la tuslim. Okay? Now, of course, um, you can't see the word Sa'id here. So you might say to me, well, Ustad, how do I know that you are actually telling Sa'id to be Muslim? Well, it's because when you make a request, you're addressing someone. You can't address someone who's unknown. You can't request something from an unknown person. So Aslim is you addressing Sa'id, which means that the actual Sa'id, the person who is you're telling to become Muslim, you don't need to say it. If you want, you can. You can say Aslim ya Sa'id. You can say that, but I decided to keep it out because it's grammatically not required. But you can say it if you want. Aslim ya Sa'id, and so on and so forth. Okay? That's why Ibn Mas'ud mentioned that whenever you hear in the Quran, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, or you who believe, فَأَصْغِ لَهَا سَمْعَكَ, then pay attention and listen carefully. Whenever you hear the statement, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, or you who believe, because now that's a khitab. That's an address from Allah to all the believers. Allah make all of us from them. Why should we pay attention? And this companion mentions because Allah is either going to command you with something or prohibit you from something. So this statement, Ya, okay, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, what's going to come after that is going to be a command or a prohibition. واضح? طيب. The reason I mentioned that is that you can say Aslim ya Zayd, but you don't have to. Now this is basically the overview. This is what the grammar map is about. Now, of course, you're going to say, Ustad, you can't be serious. You're trying to tell me that all of the language, like these 10 sentences, khalas, if I learn these 10 sentences, I know Arabic. That's it. I don't need to learn anything else. La, that's not what I'm saying to you. What I'm saying to you is, this is the beginning. This is the first step. This is all the other sentences, they return back to one of these 10 categories. However, a lot has happened to these sentences to make them so long and to intimidate you and to make you feel like that Arabic is word soup and you don't understand what he says. Because those sentences went through transformations. Okay? Those sentences went through transformations. But now we're going to figure out, inshallah, what those transformations are. Okay? So let's start and let's go back. Let's talk about the third topic for today, which is sentence structures. Okay, so these are the sentence functions that we just mentioned. But each sentence can have a specific structure. And these structures I'm going to show you, it is from easy to more difficult. So we'll start with the easy and then we'll build on it, inshallah. Again, purpose behind today's session is not to go into detail, is not to explain to you in detail what every sentence structure is about, but is to give you an overview. And we'll also do some practice as well, inshallah. Okay? So when it comes to sentence structures, then we have, barakallahu fikum, in total 4 structures. Okay? Okay, we have basic sentences, we have detailed sentences, we have compound sentences, and we have complex sentences. Okay? All right. Or you can call them clauses as well. I decided not to use the word clause in case some of you don't know what it means. But a clause is basically what we're talking about here. It's basically a single sentence. All right, a single thought. So it could be basic, detailed, compound, or complex. All right. Now let's start with the basic sentences. And we're gonna cover both of them, the nominal sentence and the verbal sentence. And then after that, we'll go to the detailed sentence and we'll give a quick overview of the complex and the compound. Type. Let's go back to this one. So starting with the basic nominal clause or sentence. Okay. Now, difference between clause and sentence, by the way, is that a clause is a sentence can consist of multiple clauses, right? And a clause is basically the minimum that is required, yes, to basically deliver meaning. Okay, so remember those 10 categories we talked about? All of these are clauses. Okay, they're clauses, as in they're complete sentences, but there's just one single clause. Now, if we combine them, yes, then we can have different types of sentences, right? So that's basically, but let's just call them sentences or clause, call them whatever you like. It doesn't matter, right? But what I want you to know is that the nominal sentence or the sentence which we call jumla ismiya, um, it can either show up in two different ways. Okay, it can show up in two different ways. Okay, it might be a jumla ismiya, and the difference between jumla ismiya and jumla fi'liya, like we said, is jumla ismiya starts with a noun, jumla fi'liya starts with a verb. It's all about the word it starts with. Now, the jumla ismiya that starts with a noun, Sa'id, let's say we're still talking about Sa'id, okay? It could be that we say about Sa'id something, and that thing we're saying about Sa'id is just one word. Okay, so that's what we call a al-khabar al-mufrad, a noun predicate. So, again, and this is the important part. A jumla ismiya consists of two main parts. You have the mubtada, the subject, you have the khabar, the predicate. That's basically your sentence. The subject, the thing you're talking about, and the khabar, what you're saying about it. Now, if I just mention a thing, if I just say, for example, al-qalam, and I'm quiet, and then 2 minutes later I say al-kitab, and then a minute later I say al-sayyara, you're going to think I'm crazy, right? What is this guy? Okay, I'm just mentioning the mubtada, I'm just mentioning the thing that I'm talking about, but I'm not saying anything about it. Okay, so that people don't think you're crazy, if you are going to make a sentence, make sure that your sentence has a mubtada followed by a khabar. Okay, or let's say you just say the khabar, you just say, for example, beautiful, you say jamil, barid, cold, and a minute later you say something like fil bayt, at home. People are going to think you're crazy. Okay, so those are khabar. No, you have to have both. Okay, so if I say, for example, al qalamu jamil, the pen is beautiful, alhamdulillah, that's a complete sentence. Okay, if I say al kitabu fil bayt, the book is at home, alhamdulillah, complete sentence. So you need a mubtada and a khabar. This is what we call the pillars of a nominal sentence. So there is no nominal sentence, there's no jumla ismi that is complete without these two pillars, a mubtada and khabar. Now, if you have a sentence that is like 3 lines long, well, it could be that it has a lot of extra things, but rest assured, it has a mubtada and a khabar, and everything else is what in Arabic they call fadla. Everything else is extra. Extra, not extra as in it's not needed, but extra as in it gives added meaning. Okay? But this khabar, it can show up either as a single noun, Sa'idun Muslimun, or it can show up as a phrase, which in Arabic we call shibh jumla. Now, this is basically we have words, we have sentences or clauses, and in between we have something called a phrase. Now, a phrase is basically, it's not one word, but neither is it a sentence. Okay? So it's basically 2 words or 3 words that go together, but they don't form a complete sentence in of themselves, but neither is it a word. So here, for example, we have this shibh jumla. This is called a prepositional phrase in the mosque. In the mosque. Now that together is a phrase in the mosque. Okay, that together it tells you in the mosque. You have a mosque inside of the mosque. So you know the place that I'm talking about. But it's not a complete sentence in of itself. Even though it consists of two words. It could a phrase could even consist of three words. It could consist of four words. But up until you have the two pillars, that phrase will not become a sentence. Okay, so again, pay attention. The mubtada, you have it here, both of them. Mubtada, Sa'id, Sa'id. The mubtada is always there. Sa'id and Sa'id. Okay? But that can be followed by a single word, or it can be followed by a phrase. That's what we call the basic nominal sentence. جملة اسمية that is basic. واضح? Trust me, if you figure this out and you learn this and you master this, you've already covered 10 to 20% of the language, because a lot of the sentences, especially in beginner books, they are as basic as this. They are as basic as this. If I go to بين يديك right now, I can give you at least 90 sentences in بين يديك, العربي بين يديك, as a beginner's book that follow this template, which is مبتدا خبر. واضح؟ هو مهندس. That's مبتدا خبر. أبي طبيب. My father is a doctor. That's مبتدا خبر. And so on and so forth. Okay, واضح? That's the basic nominal sentence. Now, I need you to pay attention to this. Pillars. These are pillars. No sentence complete without them. Now, the same thing applies to a verbal sentence. So we also have a basic verbal sentence. But the words that we use are slightly different. Okay? So instead of mubtada, we have fi'l. Because of course, we said a verbal sentence is a sentence that starts with a verb. So of course, the first thing in that sentence needs to be the fi'l, needs to be the verb. Now, that verb is going to need what they call in Arabic a fa'il, a doer, or more specifically in grammar, they call it subject, which is the same as the mubtada is also subject. Okay? So every sentence has a subject, of course. There's a hero in every sentence that the whole sentence is about. Okay? But that hero, you can either describe it with a noun, or you can ascribe a verb to that hero. So Sa'id is our hero in this sentence. Sa'id. What about Sa'id with the verbal sentence? Aslama Sa'idun. Sa'id became a Muslim, or more literally to submit. Sa'id submitted. I submitted to Allah. Aslama Sa'idun. Now this is the case, i.e. Two word sentence, a verbal sentence that consists of two words. We have that only if we have a fi'l lazim, an intransitive verb, a verb that does not require an object. A verb that does not require an object. When we have such a sentence, then we have something like this. Aslama Sa'idun. Okay? Aslama Sa'idun. That's it. Complete sentence. Sa'id became a Muslim. Because this verb itself, it doesn't need an object. Yani when you become Muslim, you don't really affect something else. That verb doesn't have a direct object. It doesn't affect anyone but yourself. All right? Directly. Of course, indirectly, but not directly. But you also have some verbs that need an object. They in Arabic are called fi'l muta'addi. We covered this in the vocabulary challenge. And I remember I used to group the verbs according to if they are muta'addi or lazim. Same thing here. If we have a fi'l that is muta'addi, then we're going to need an object, such as kataba, to write. When you write something, or if you write, you do the act of writing, you have to write something, right? There's something that has to be written, okay? It could be a book, it could be a story, it could be a page, it could be an article, it doesn't matter, but you have to write something. Something is written. So that's what we call the object, مفعول به. So فعل, فاعل, مفعول به. This is the standard order of words. Now, it is possible that the order is mixed up. It could be that we'd say كتب or سعيد كتب كتابا. That would be nominal sentence actually. كتب كتابا سعيد مثلا. Okay? Um, it's possible that you change the order in Arabic. We talked about that last time. But we're not talking right now about the rearranging of words. Let's talk about the default structure. This is the default structure, which they call in linguistics VSO, verb, subject, object, VSO. Okay? طيب. And these again are the pillars of a verbal sentence. Now, you will not appreciate the pillars of a sentence, okay, until you see a sentence that is overcrowded with information. And then you start to struggle. And you think to yourself, what is this sentence about? Only when you see such a thing, that's when you will be like, okay, Jazakallah khair Ustad, now it makes sense. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Okay? Um, going to give you, actually, I do have a sentence, but it's actually, it builds up on the previous sentence. Anyway, we'll do those exercises another time, for later, inshallah, whereby I give you a sentence and you have to figure out what the pillars are. Because now the next sentence, which is the detailed, if you like, sentence structure, it's built on this previous sentence. Okay, so here we go. Now we have a long sentence. This is what we call a detailed nominal clause. This is what I mean by detailed. As in, this sentence now has what we call pointers. It has more information. Okay. Now, when would you want to add more information to a sentence? For multiple reasons. Sometimes in order to inform the person, right? That's the whole point of speaking, isn't it? Or talking or communicate, is to inform people sometimes. Most of the time anyway. Or sometimes you want to add more information to be sure that the person knows what you're talking about. So مثلا سعيد. Okay, so we have the same سعيد subject, Muslimun predicate. But as you can see, they are both followed by many different words. So the whole sentence is سعيد بن زيد مسلم جديد من مدينة Washington. That's the whole sentence. Okay. Now, if you've never learned Arabic before, you might think that this is a long sentence, difficult to understand. But let me show you how easy it is. Now, what we have here is Sa'id. That's the mubtada. Okay, like I said, we're going to go with the default structure. The mubtada, sometimes it might be put later on in the sentence and the khabar might be brought forth. But like I said, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the default structure, because once you figure out the default structure, then you will notice when things are out of order. So we have Sa'id. Now, Sa'id, as you know, there are many Sa'ids in the world. صح? So if obviously I'm talking to someone who knows Sa'id, or Sa'id is with us right next to me, I say Sa'id and Muslim, then that's fine. But what if, let's say, I walk into, let's say, an office of Jami'atu al-Malik Saud or Jami'atu al-Imam, and I want to put in a good word for Sa'id. I want Sa'id to be accepted. So obviously the guy behind the counter doesn't know who Sa'id is. So I say to him, Assalamu alaikum, alaikum salam. I'm here to put a good word in for my friend Sa'id. So the guy says to me, who is Sa'id? Okay, or which Sa'id? You see, I've got many Sa'id here that have applied. So I say to him, Sa'id ibn Zayd. That's the guy I'm talking about, Sa'id ibn Zayd. Now, Ibn Zayd, let's look at this. If you look at these words, as you can see, they are actually names or persons, all three of them, or names for persons, right? So we have Sa'id, we have son, and we have Zayd. Okay. However, this over here, we call it Tarkib Idafi, which is it's mudaf ilayh. We talked about that before, we'll talk about it later. Okay. Which basically is Zayd. We use this word Zayd to explain to you what Ibn means, which Ibn we're talking about. So Sa'id, the son of who? Zayd. Sa'id, the son of Zayd. Okay, there are many sons in the world, right? We're all sons or daughters. صح? But the son of who? Son of Zayd. So now we know exactly who we're talking about. Now, this phrase altogether, this whole thing together, they are what we call in Arabic badal. As in English, they're called appositive. In other words, this and this are the same thing. This one and these two, they're the same thing. They're the same thing. For example, my name is Muhammad, but I'm also bin Abdul Wali. And I'm also Abu Ibrahim. I'm all three of them. Okay? Same thing here. This guy, he is Sa'id, but he's also Ibn Zayd. He's also the son of Zayd. واضح? Now, by themselves, Sa'id by itself, Ibn Zayd by itself is ambiguous. Because Zayd might have many children. If I say to you, I'm bin Abdul Wali, well, so is my brother Yusuf and my other brother Isa. They're all bin Abdul Walis. Okay? So by themselves, or if I say to Muhammad, how many Muhammads are there in the world? So by themselves, they are ambiguous. But when you put them together, and you have the intersection between these two things, now you know who you're talking about. So Muhammad bin Abdul Wali. There's only one Muhammad bin Abdul Wali in our family. واضح? Sa'id ibn Zayd. So that long list that this guy has in front of him at the university that we talked about, most likely he's only going to have one Sa'id bin Zayd. Okay? Okay. Now, Sa'id al-Muslimun, Sa'id Zayd Muslim. طيب. But that's not enough, I suppose, to convince this guy that he should accept him. Right? So I'm going to give him more information. So again, like I said, this more information, sometimes we give more information in order to inform the person for whatever reasons, or sometimes to be more precise. This more information of bin Zayd was to be more precise, so that we know and he knows who we're talking about, Sa'id bin Zayd. Okay, Muslimun, he's a Muslim. So still we have the Sa'id Muslim, that's the core structure of the sentence, which is Sa'id Zayd Muslim. But now we know that it's Sa'id bin Zayd and not Sa'id bin Abdullah or Sa'id or whoever. It's Sa'id bin Zayd, specific Sa'id. And he's Muslim. Now, what kind of Muslim is he? What can I say about him to convince this guy that he should accept him? Because, of course, almost all students, if not all of them, that apply to the Jamia, the university, they're all Muslims. What sets Sa'id apart? Let me think. Sa'id Muslimun Jadid. Sa'id is a new Muslim. I know that sets him apart. Why? Because, of course, the university wants to accept reverts and new Muslims because they're more in need of the university. For the most part, not always, but for the most part, they're more in need than someone who has been Muslim his whole life. So that's why they might give a priority to new Muslims. Okay? But then I think to myself, let me add even more information. Right? Let me tell him which city he's from. Right? Or which country he's from. Okay? Why? Because that helps again with university application. Why? Because if he is from a country where the majority of people are not Muslims, right? Or he's from a Western country, he's more likely to be accepted because the Jamia, one of its objectives is to spread Tawheed and to spread Islam, especially in non-Muslim countries. So I say to him, Muslimun Jadidun min Madinati Washington. From the city of Washington. Okay? Now, these three words, Barakallahu fikum, I want you, going forward, I want you to look at Arabic sentences and I want you to look at it by breaking it up into phrases. Okay? Those words that belong together, look at it as one unit. Because that way, this sentence now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 words. But if you pay attention, you'll see that it actually only consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components. It doesn't consist of 9 different things. It consists of 5 components. We have Sa'id, that's the mubtada. We have Muslim, that is the khabar. Then we have this badal, which can take the place of this. Together with this, gives us more specificity, like we said. Then we have this adjective over here, jadid, to show you what kind of Muslim he is. And then we have this whole shibh jumla, what we call phrase, prepositional phrase, that tells us where he's from. Min Medinati Washington. Now, of course, I could have just said Min Washington, right? Which would be fine. And I can also say Min Medinati Washington. So Min Medina, he's from a city, the city of Washington, or you can say he's from Washington. Either way, but I decided to make it a bit longer to show you that many words can be grouped together. واضح? Okay. So why am I showing you this? Because I want you to pay attention to what? To what we mean by pillars of a sentence and extras or pointers. Okay? Every single one of these extra components, we've added them for a reason. Okay, and I want you going forward, I want you to look at grammar as something, a tool that you use in order to communicate and achieve your objectives. I walked into that university with a very clear and important objective in mind. I want my friend Saeed to be accepted. Okay, so every word that I say counts. The worker behind the desk is not gonna, doesn't have all day. Okay, I need to be sure that I use my words wisely. Okay, so I made sure that I clarified which Saeed I'm talking about in case there are multiple Saeeds by mentioning his last name. I also mentioned that he's a new Muslim because I think that will help. And I also mentioned that he is from the city of Washington. Okay? واضح? Now, this is just one example, of course. The examples are many. Okay? The point I'm trying to make is that I want you to look at grammar going forward, not in terms of, okay, this one's got dhamma, okay, it's adjective, this one follows that one, and this one's got, why this one have two fathas, two kas, la, la, la. I want you to look at grammar in terms of function. I want you to establish that connection between grammar and meaning. Okay? Then later on, we'll talk about, okay, Ustad, how did you know? How did you know that this word's an adjective for this one? Ustad, how did you know that this one is a badal and not a sifa? Okay, Ustad, how did you know that this is together, all together a prepositional phrase? How did you know that? We'll talk about that later. Labas. That's the detail of the grammar challenge. Okay, but this is mindset shift. Okay, then we have a detailed verbal sentence. I'm not going to talk about this one in detail. It works the same way, and obviously, as you can see, by the way, I've color coded all of these words, and inshallah, this is the system we're going to follow going forward. So we have this green color for the mubtada or the subject of the sentence. We have purple for the khabar. Anything that's extra is going to be orange, and functional words or particles are in red. Okay? And we have one other color called blue. Blue. Now, what's the difference between the blue and the orange? The difference is that orange words are there to describe nouns, whereas the blue words are there to describe the verb. So you have to know. Yes? When we talk, we only have verbs and nouns, basically. That's all we have. Particles, they do their function, whatever. We'll talk about them later. But we have verbs and nouns. Okay, now, the way you talk about a verb is completely different from the way you talk about a noun. The attributes of a noun are completely different from the attributes of a verb. For example, a verb has a place and a time, but a noun doesn't. A noun doesn't have a time. So, for example, here we have Aslama Sa'idun, Sa'id became Muslim. And here we have Al-Yawm, today. Now, this Al-Yawm is blue. Why? Because it talks about the verb. When did that verb happen? It happened today. When did this action happen? Happened today. Today. He became Muslim today. Okay? Aslama Sa'id ibn Zaydin. Okay? Again, I kept this one to show you how this specifies Sa'id. Fil masjidi. Fil masjidi. Again, we have shibh jumla. We have what? A prepositional phrase. This is an answer to aina. Where? Where did Sa'id become Muslim? Fil masjid. Mata, when? And when I say aina, by the way, remember this icon over here? This is for places. I'm still using the same icons from the vocabulary challenge, and I'll talk to you later about why I'm using these icons and how the words we've learned in the vocabulary challenge connect to the grammar challenge. So here, this is a place, masjid, fil masjid, in the mosque. Where did he become Muslim? In the mosque. When? Today. Okay, how? How? Description. This is a descriptive word. In Arabic, we call this hal. Hal is different from sifa. In the nominal sentence, we had sifa, which is adjective. Hal is what we call an adverb. So hal is for verbs, adjectives is for nouns. Okay? How did he become Muslim? So this word over here, masruran, it talks about how he was when he became Muslim. He was happy, happily. He became Muslim happily. واضح? Okay, so again, that is a description of this verb. Okay, and so on and so forth. The sentence can be expanded more and more. واضح? Now, any questions? I'm gonna ask questions now in WooClap in order to put this thing to life. I'm gonna ask you some questions, inshallah. Okay, check the sentence. Check the comments. Sorry, check the YouTube comments for a link to WooClap. Okay, someone said, can we put comma before and after Ibn Zayd as we would in English? No. Arabic, classical Arabic, we don't need commas. We don't need full stops. We don't need any punctuation marks. واضح? I'm going to show you that. Once we start talking about compound sentences and complex sentences, I'll show you how in Arabic we don't even need commas. We don't need that. That's for English. We don't need that for Arabic. Okay? So I want you to join me on WooClap. And before we go to WooClap, now I want to reveal to you the connection between the vocabulary challenge and the grammar challenge and how together they make up a bigger system, inshallah. Okay? طيب, Bismillah. Haven't really fully prepared this. I was going to create a table for it, but never really got a chance. But let me just open one of the vocabulary challenge screens or one of the vocabulary challenge lists of words that we had from before. And then we'll take it from there. Shirt and tires, window, actually. Okay, now remember this. This is day 4 Islam. Look, we had particles, persons, things, actions, concepts, times, and places. Every single one of these categories is or corresponds to an important component of a sentence. Okay? Now, even the pillars of a sentence, yes, they can only be some of these, they can be from some of these categories. I'm going to show you now what the connection is. And that, inshallah ta'ala, should make it really easy for you to make sentences in the future. Because all you need to do is just find the right word from the right column and put things together and then just make the grammatical changes that are needed. So let me ask you on WooClap. Bismillah. First question. Which of the following word categories would be most likely used as a mubtada? Pick 3 only. Okay, so here we have these word categories. We have particles, action, person, thing, concept, description, time, and place. When we talk about mubtada, which is the subject of a sentence, there are 3 categories from these 8 categories, which most likely would be used as a mubtada. So if you want to write a sentence, and you want to write a nominal sentence, you want to start off with a mubtada, you should look at these 3 categories first and foremost. Okay, you should look what? At these 3 categories. After looking at these 3 categories, then only then should you what? go on to the khabar. Okay, so which three categories? I mean, I say to you pick three only because there are situations whereby you might have one of the other categories as a mubtada, but here we're talking about most likely. Okay, languages are generally speaking very flexible, and languages are all about the meaning being clear. That's why you will hardly ever find a rule that is true 100% for the whole language. Because language is something that is fluid, people they use it in different ways. But here we're talking about, and this is the nature of this whole challenge in this course, which is we simplify stuff, yes, and we leave exceptions to the rule for later. Okay, so right now, what do you think? Huh? What do you think? Now, almost all of you agree that person is most likely used as mubtada, which is true. Because if we're gonna have a subject, we're most likely gonna be talking about someone. Or the other thing that most of you agreed on is something. Yes, so we're gonna say some. We're gonna make a statement about someone or something. And the third one I would say is concept, which again has the third most votes. Concept as well. All right. Now someone said place. Well, places yes, but like I said, that's highly unlikely, and not highly unlikely, but it's not that often that we use a place as a subject. Um, but it is possible. It is possible. But I said most likely. Most likely is that we use person, thing, or concept. Concept, as in we talk about religion, al-Islamu, dinul haq. We talk about an exam, al-ikhtibar, anything that is not tangible. A lot of our sentences are like that. Okay? So the three correct answers would be person, thing, and concept. Now, that's not to dismiss place. It's very much possible that you say something like, Al-Riyadu Madinatun Kabira. Riyadh is a big city. Okay? Um, but it's not as commonly used as concept, things, or person. Same thing for time. We might say, يوم الجمعة يوم سعيد. Friday is a happy day. صح? We can talk about يوم الجمعة, which is time. But again, like I said, they're not the most likely. Most likely, I said most likely. So, in that same way, I want you to tell me which of the following word categories will be most likely used as a fa'il, as a subject of a verb. Pick two only. Before we had three, now I only want you to pick two. Okay? Only pick two. I said fa'il, huh? Not fi'il. Fa'il. The subject, the person who does it, or well, almost gave away the answer, haven't I? Naam. So yes, so the fa'il most likely going to be definitely a person. People are the ones that do actions. All right. Or it could also be a thing, as in an animal, or even sometimes we might say السماء تمطر الآن. We might ascribe an action to something that is a concept. We might, or something that's an inanimate object. It's possible. So most likely person and thing. Okay. Now concepts as well. You can say, for example, بدأ الاختبار. The exam has started, but it's not as likely as person and thing. Okay. Again, these are not right or wrong answers, by the way. Don't get me wrong. Okay, these are very relative. But the point is, I just want you to see how these grammar concepts, mubtada, khabar, fa'il, how they correspond to specific word categories. Okay, so here we have khabar. Okay, this one's more interesting. Which word categories would be most suitable to be used as a khabar, as a predicate? Pick only two. Okay, now mubtada and fa'il might be, it's much more encompassing, almost all boxes you can tick. All right, but how about khabar? Khabar is very specific. All right, which are most likely used as a khabar? Okay, so let's say, um, let's go back to our word category screen. Let's try and make a sentence. Let's try and make a sentence. So we have this one. Okay, let's say we have the mubtada. Let's take it from person. Let's say we have um, al-hajj. Okay, al-hajj. Al-hajj. Okay, the pilgrim. Okay, so what can I say about the pilgrim? What can I use to talk about the pilgrim? I can't really use a thing, can I? And you can't describe a person with a thing. You can't say, for example, the pilgrim is sacrificial animal, or the pilgrim is a pebble. So you can't really, thing doesn't really work well as a khabar. Action, of course, doesn't work well as a khabar because actions are verbal sentences. They're completely different. Um, but as a khabar, what we can use is, for example, a description, which is not in here, by the way. We could use descriptions, definitely. Sifat. Al-hajju, yes, mut'abun, he's tired. Okay? So descriptions are definitely, they serve as good khabars. Or you can also have concepts. Concepts. What do you mean by that? You would normally wouldn't describe a person with a concept, but you can, for example, say about um, anything else. For example, you can say um, ad-dinu yusrun. The religion is ease. The religion is ease. So you have deen, which is a concept that you can now describe with another concept. Ad-dinu yusrun. Establish the connection between two concepts. That ease and religion are two things that go together. واضح? So concepts would normally be described with concepts, and if it's people or things, then we normally use a sifa to describe them. Okay, final one for in terms of word categories. Which word category would be most suitable to be used as part of a shibh jumla, a phrase? Pick only two. A phrase. So a phrase, what do we say? A phrase is something that consists of more than one word but could be considered as one thing, right? And it normally consists of either a particle and a noun or two nouns, for example, right? So shibh jumla, if you want to have a shibh jumla, we mentioned that the jumla ismiya could either be, it can have one noun or it can have a shibh jumla. When we want to have a shibh jumla, which column would we look at? We would look at which column, all right? Which column would we look at in order to describe and to use as a khabar, okay? To use a, let's say, prepositional phrase, for example. Okay, if we want to have a prepositional phrase, we would go to time and place. These two. These are the ones that make up shibh jumla. You can't really make a shibh jumla with anything else, unless it's, yeah, you really can't. You can't really. Um, unless mudaf and mudaf ilayh, but I don't really consider mudaf ilayh to be a phrase. But if we consider mudaf ilayh to be a phrase, then maybe you might look at something else. But generally speaking, most likely you're going to look at the time and place. So Muhammadun or Sa'idun, we said fil masjid. Sa'id is in the masjid. Masjid being a place. Or you can say, for example, al-ikhtibaru yawm al-sabt. The exam is on Saturday. Yawm al-sabt being a time. واضح? Okay. Now we have explained, barakallahu fikum. See where we are. We've talked about basic sentences. I've showed you detailed sentences, right? Now let's talk about compound sentences. Now, I'm not really going to talk in detail about compound sentences, but I am going to ask you a question. And then based on that question, inshallah, you'll understand what's meant by compound sentences. So go back to WooClap. I want you to go back to WooClap and answer this question. Bismillah. Where do we go? Okay. Zara, I'm going to read the sentence, the thingy to you. زار خالد سعيدا في البيت وخليل في المستشفى. زار خالد سعيدا في البيت وخليل في المستشفى. Who got a visit from Khalid? Who got a visit from Khalid? Obviously, I can't translate it for you because then I would give away the answer. But Zara, which means to visit, Khalidun, سعيدا في البيت وخليل في المستشفى. Question is, who got a visit from Khalid? Is it Saeed only, Khalil only, Saeed and Khalil, or Khalil and Saeed? Those are the options. Okay. زار خالد سعيدا في البيت وخليل في المستشفى. Okay. And this sentence will also explain to us why in Arabic we do not need commas. This will show you why in Arabic we do not need commas. Type. Okay, it seems like there is a big disagreement with regards to, is Sa'id the only one that got visited, or Sa'id and Khalil? Now the correct answer is Sa'id. Khalil did not get a visit from Khalid. Has fatha indicating is مفعول به. نعم. Alright, let's explain why. Let's explain why. This is now, we're going into the topic of what? Compound sentences. What do we mean by compound sentences? A compound sentence, barakallahu fikum, is when we have a sentence that actually consists of multiple sentences added together. Okay? A sentence made of multiple sentences added together. All right, so let's figure out this sentence over here. زار خالد سعيدا في البيت وخليل في المستشفى. Some of you said Sa'id is the only one who got a visit, and some of you said Sa'id and Khalil got a visit, both of them. The correct answer we said is that only Sa'id got a visit. Why is that the case? All right, let me write for you how it would have been if Sa'id and Khalil, both of them got a visit. This is how it would be. This is how it would be. زار خالد سعيدا في البيت, and I would change this ضمة to فتحة. That's all it takes. See? That's the only difference between the two answers. خليل and خليلا. That's the only difference. So why is it different? Why are these two sentences so drastically different? Because, like I said, the first one means that Khalid visited Sa'id at home. Okay? And then وخليل في المستشفى. Okay. This is the one that you guys, ones who got it wrong, you basically translated this as Khalid visited Sa'id at home and Khalil at the hospital. That's how you translated it. Here, if it was like this would mean that Khalid visited Sa'id at home and he visited Khalil at the hospital. Okay? This is what we call compound sentence. A compound sentence basically when we have a sentence and we attach another sentence to it. So we have two sentences. But for the sake of brevity and keeping things concise, we don't repeat the elements that the sentence has in common. What do I mean by that? Let me show you. Khalid visited Sa'id at home and Khalil at the hospital. This basically is two sentences. It is Khalid visited Saeed at home and Khalid visited Khalil at the hospital. واضح؟ Those are basically two sentences. This and basically means everything we had before, which is Khalid visited Saeed. I actually misspelled this at home. نعم. Everything we had before the and, this is the and by the way, let me make it red. This is our function word. This basically means everything that came before, yes, also applies to Khalil. That's what and basically means. So basically, we have two sentences. Khalid visited Saeed at home and Khalid visited Khalil at the hospital. But language is so beautiful that what we can do is we can get rid of Khalid visited because we don't need to repeat it because they have it both in common. And we can just say Khalid visited Saeed at home and Khalil at the hospital. That makes sense in English and also in Arabic. In Arabic, it's the same thing. What works in the same way. This what is called atifa, conjunction, and we use it to make a compound sentence. This is an example of a compound sentence. Okay. This, however, these are just two completely separate sentences. Okay. Um, or we can also interpret it as one sentence, which would be a a complex sentence. Okay, a complex sentence. What's a complex sentence? What's a complex? What's the difference between compound and complex? Difference is that a complex sentence is a sentence within a sentence. So what would this mean? This basically means, let me translate this one for you. This basically means Khalid visited Saeed at home whilst Khalil was at the hospital. That's one way that it could be translated. Or it can also be translated, which is probably easier for you to understand as a beginner, which is Khalid visited Saeed at home and Khalil is at the hospital. واضح؟ As you can see, these are two completely separate sentences. Khalil is at the hospital. Why is this a completely separate sentence? Because we have the is over here. So this Khalil is مبتدا في المستشفى is خبر. Remember we had the مبتدا and خبر for a nominal sentence. We said the مبتدا could be one word and then the خبر could be a prepositional phrase. This is exactly what we have. Khalid visited Saeed at home and Khalil is at the hospital. So imagine someone said to you, um, why didn't Khalid visit Saeed? Why didn't Khalid visit Khalil? Then you answer, you say, Khalid visited Saeed at home. Okay. But Khalil, yes, he's still at the hospital. All right. That's why I didn't visit him because he can't visit. The hospital is far or the hospital has got visitation times. But he did visit Saeed because Saeed's at home. So Khalid visited Saeed at home and Khalil, oh, he's still in the hospital. واضح? The point I'm trying to make is this. This is the point, which is that why is this one, by the way, a complex sentence? Because whilst Khalil was at the hospital, this is basically this whole sentence is extra information that explains visited. Okay, so his visitation, Khalid's visitation to Saeed, it happened when? It happened during Khalil's stay at the hospital. Okay, that's when it happened. That's what we call now a complex sentence. You have a sentence, and then you have another sentence within this sentence, yes, as extra information. And these complex sentences, they come in different forms. You can have this one like we showed you right now. You can have جملة الصلة والموصول, such as relative clauses, such as you can say, for example, let's say someone said to you, someone asked you, let's say, who A teacher walked into the room, okay, and he wants to ask about a student. Now he doesn't remember the student's name, but what he does remember is that this student won a competition. He remembers that. So he walks into the classroom and he says, "Where is the student who won yesterday's competition? أين الطالب الذي فاز في المسابقة أمس?" Where's the student who won yesterday's competition? Now, this whole sentence, "who won yesterday's competition," okay, won yesterday's competition, as in he won yesterday's competition, a complete sentence. But we're using this whole sentence to describe which student we're talking about. That's what we call a relative clause. So that's a complex sentence. It's like a sentence within a sentence. Okay. Or also another complex sentence, for example, if this, then that sentences. Like in تصبر في الدنيا تدخل الجنة في الآخرة. If you're patient in this dunya, then you will enter Jannah in the hereafter. So here we have two sentences. They're both dependent on each other, as in we can't say they're separate sentences. Together they give a meaning, which is if you're patient in this world, you are successful in the hereafter. Okay? تصبر في الدنيا, that's a whole sentence. تدخل الجنة في الآخرة is a whole sentence. Now these two sentences, put them together so that you make one dependent on the other. Now you have a complex sentence, which is a jumla shartiyya, it's called a conditional sentence. Okay. Type. So again, we're going to talk about all of these in more detail. We'll stop there. But the point is, sentence structures in Arabic, we have basic sentences, we have detailed sentences, we have compound sentences, which again, you have to really pay attention to the fathas and the dhammas. Why is, by the way, khalilan here a compound sentence and khalilun here a separate sentence? This goes back to agreement rules, because sa'idan is an object and khalilan follows sa'id. It is similar to sa'id, which means khalil is also an object for the verb zara, which means Khalil got visited. How do we know? Because now this is a verb, this is the object, and this one is similar to the object, so it takes the same ruling. This is the object, and this is added to the object. But this one over here, it's not the same as the subject. There's a difference. There's no agreement. Since there's no agreement, that tells us that the sentence is complete. This sentence, this word has nothing to do with this word, because this one is mansub and this one is marfu'. They have nothing to do with each other. Which means that if this one is an object for this verb, then this one cannot be an object for this verb because they are different. واضح? That's why we don't need commas in the Arabic language. No need for commas. Alhamdulillah. Okay? It just needs a bit of understanding. Now to kind of summarize what we've said, these sentence structures, we said, go back to the components. The components. If the sentence structure has only pillars, then it's a basic sentence. If it has also pointers, then it's a detailed sentence. Now, pointers is in extra information, right? Useful information. Pointers that give you a better understanding what's being talked about. Okay? And if that sentence now also has particles, then is most likely going to be a compound or a complex sentence. So these particles are what allow us to transform sentences. So going back to when we earlier talked about those 10 categories. Those 10 categories, if you look at them, they look very, very easy. But that's if you do not consider the fact that we have something called particles, which can transform those sentences. And you can turn them into different beasts, if you like, depending on what you want to achieve. So these particles, they perform specific functions which transform sentences and or establish links with other sentences. So these, you have one sentence, another sentence, then you have a particle, you establish a link. A conditional, for example, relationship. a relative relationship, or you establish another link which is like a conjunction, like this sentence added to this sentence. We do this with particles. Now, the Arabic sentences, they consist of these three things: pillars, pointers, particles. And you have to know the difference between these things. The pillars is the core meaning, pointers um, point you to the what's meant, or they give you more information. Particles transform the whole sentence. So, for example, you have an affirmative statement, Sa'idun Muslimun. By way of a particle, you can change that whole sentence and make it a negative statement. Let's say you have a statement you want to turn into a question. By way of a particle, you turn it into a question. So these particles, you can use them to, like I said, to negate a sentence. You can use them to ask a question. So you can turn the whole statement into a question. You can use them to emphasize. We said we have affirmative statements, right? But affirmative statements are different levels of the different levels. Some statements are more emphasized than others. How do you emphasize them? For example, we can use the particle inna. So Allah says in the Quran, Wallahu ghafurur rahim. Allah is the oft forgiving, the most merciful. But in other places you see, Inna Allah ghafurur rahim. What's the difference? Inna is more emphasized. Indeed, Allah is the oft forgiving, the most merciful. Or for example, you come across the particle illa, which is sometimes we use it to show exclusivity, like la ilaha illallah. There's a big difference between Allahu huwa al-ilah or Allah huwa al-ma'bud. Allah is the one that is worshipped. And saying there's none that is worthy of worship except Allah. La ilaha illallah. There's a big difference between the two. There's a big difference between the two. Okay? Because one gives you exclusivity. Allah says, وَلَا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّهِ, and do not worship except for Him. What does that mean? It means don't worship. If anything, do not do any act of worship except if it's only for Allah. So this obviously is a much stronger way of emphasizing it, that there's absolutely no exceptions to be made, that only Allah should be worshipped. And you also have, for example, إِنَّمَا, nothing but. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, believers are nothing but brothers. Now that's a much more stronger statement than al-mu'minuna ikhwah, the believers are brothers. So again, these are the sort of particles which you'll see in the Quran in many different places. But the reason I'm showing you this particular approach is because in order to appreciate these linguistic devices, if you like, or these particles, you need to know what the default is, what the asl is. And then you need to look at how these things have transformed the sentence. That's how you get meaning. Okay? That's why our focus is making sure you master the basic sentence. Okay? Then we learn how to transform these sentences and make different things out of them. Okay? You can also transform the whole sentence by changing the sentence type. You can use a particle to make a sentence which is a nominal sentence and turn it into a verbal sentence. Yeah, you can do that. Like, for example, which we call them particles. In Arabic grammar books, they might call them verbs. But we call them particles because in our books, particles are special words. They could originally be nouns or verbs or particles. It doesn't matter what the origin is. It's just that they are very specific words that have specific functions. So, for example, you have Muhammadun. We said Sa'idun Muslim, right? Okay, what if you want to make it past tense? You don't need to come with the verb. Just use كان سعيد مسلما. Now you change that actual nominal sentence and made it past tense. Okay? You can also use it, like I said, to change the sentence type from a nominal sentence to a verbal sentence. Or you can also change the definiteness, as in, instead of speaking generally, now you might speak about something specific by using alif lam, for example. Or like I said, you can also link sentences by making conjunctions, conditional sentences, or relative clauses. These are some of the things you can do with particles. So these particles are overlooked, but they are really extremely powerful. Now, we come to our last point. a last point. So again, we have three sentence functions, all right, that each have two subcategories. If we exclude nominal sentences when it comes to request, we have in total 10 categories. Those 10 categories of basic sentences, we said we can make them more detailed, or we can join them together and make compound sentences, or we can embed them into each other and make complex sentences, right? Then we said, and we can use particles, yes, to give different flavors. Like, okay, is an affirmative statement, but what level of affirmation are we talking about? How emphasized is it? Okay, so we use these particles again within the confines of those 10 categories to uh, basically make those sentences either stronger or weaker or conditional or what have you, right? Because a conditional statement is still a statement, right? But a conditional statement gives a different meaning than a normal statement, right? All right. Now, question: are we done? Is that it? In other words, if we learn these basic sentences and the details that we can add, and we learn how to make sentences into compound sentences or how to embed them in one another, and we cover the different particles so that we can transform these sentences, does that mean we're done? What do you guys think? Does that mean khalas, we're done? We've covered the grammar or the core grammar that I'm talking about. Of course, I'm not saying to you all of grammar, as in there are other things in grammar that um, type. So, question: who can tell me what's missing? Check on Wooclap. Hmm. No, no, I'm not talking about practice. As in, I know practice is missing. What I'm talking about is in terms of grammar, balagha. Okay, balagha. Yes, balagha is missing in the sense that, but let's say there's a completely different science, right? Um, the intricacies of the language, the subtleties, the balagha. Okay, someone's here onto something. Tasrif. Someone's onto something. Someone here's onto something. Tasrif. I'rab. Flexibility of the language. Okay. All right. So, yes. So, what's missing is two things. What's missing is are the two things that we talked about last time. Remember what we said last time? Who can remember? We said the language is about two things. Or Arabic grammar is about achieving two things. We said it's about achieving two things. Who remembers what they are? Arabic language, you said, is about achieving two things. Yeah, particles, we said, are words that perform specific functions. Perform specific, those are particles. They could, in their origin, be nouns, they could be origins, they could be verbs, they could be some things that are not a noun or a verb, but that's not the point. The point is they perform specific functions, so they deserve to be covered by themselves. Yeah, so we said grammar is about two things: word order and agreement, flexibility and conciseness. Yes, flexibility and conciseness. Grammar, we said, is about those two things: flexibility and conciseness. And we said we achieve that by what? How do we achieve this? We said we achieve it by way of two things, okay? Which was i'rab, government, and agreement. Now, based on that, to show you what's missing, I want you to answer this question. After answering this question, you'll know what I mean. Um, First, remember the detailed sentence that we had? Sa'idun سعيد بن زيد مسلم جديد من مدينة Washington. That's the detailed sentence that we had. I want you to rewrite the sentence, okay? But I want you to replace the subject. Instead of Sa'id, I want you to replace the subject with Sa'ida. There we go. Okay, and then you'll know what I'm talking about and you'll know what's missing. Okay, so answer that question and we'll clap. So we have our detailed sentence for today, which was Sa'idun or Sa'id ibn Zaydin Muslimun Jadidun min Medinati Washington. Remember, I walked into the university office. I want my friend Sa'id to be accepted at the university. So I spoke to the guy behind the counter. I told him, my friend Sa'id ibn Zayd is a new Muslim from the city of Washington. Now, let's say you are walking into the women campus and you want to do the same thing for your friend Sa'ida, one of the sisters. Okay? Um, I want you to basically say the same sentence, but just replace Sa'id with Sa'ida. Replace Sa'id with Sa'ida. Now you walk into the office and you want to speak on behalf of Sa'ida. واضح؟ Okay. ما شاء الله. ممتاز. Okay. Okay, so as you can see, mashallah, tabarakallah, most of you got it right. Or at least you got the point, which is that just by replacing Sa'id with Sa'ida, a lot of other things changed in the sentence. Okay, this is just a small example. So we had Sa'ida, we had Sa'id bin Zayd turned into Sa'idatu bint Zayd or Ibnatu Zayd. Okay, and instead of Muslimun, it turned into Muslimatun. Instead of Jadidun, we ended up with Jadidatun. Min Madinati Washington, that didn't change. So what's missing basically is agreement rules. Okay? What's missing is what? Agreement rules. And this is basically the gist of grammar. This is basically what most of the practice is going to be on, which is how do you take a sentence template, yes, and change it to a different form. واضح? So that brings us to our final point, which is sentence templates and forms. Now, the first 10 sentences I gave you, yes, they are sentence templates for the basic sentences. A template. It's just a template. سعيد مسلم أسلم سعيد ليس سعيدا ليس سعيد مسلما ما أسلم سعيد. These are what? Sentence templates. Let me show you again. In case someone is joining us late. So we had now we had these. This is what we started with, right? These. Okay, so we said we have these three functions, okay, which gives us these 10 different possibilities. These are sentence templates. Now these you can expand, add more detail. Okay, they become bigger. Or you can compound, just like playing with Legos, and make long sentences. Or if you want, what you can do is, by way of particles, you can embed certain sentences in other sentences. Right? These are what we call our sentence templates. Okay? Once you get the hang of it, right, then what you're going to do is you're going to create different forms. Different what? Forms. Okay. What what would that mean? What do we mean by creating different forms? For example, in order to create different forms, we need to look at the main components of that sentence. We said each sentence has mainly two components, either مبتدأ and خبر or فعل and فاعل. In other words, each sentence either going to be about nouns or it's going to be about a noun and a verb. Okay. Now, in order to know what kind of forms you're going to have, you need to remember what attributes a noun has, what attributes a verb has, and then you just need to make sure that everything agrees. Why? Why such importance placed on agreement? Because, like we said many times before, agreement tells us which word goes with which word. We connect words together and we know which words are explaining which words because of agreement. Without agreement, we would be confused. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to give you an example. We're going to suffice this like the last example, okay? Um, I want you to go on Google App and I want you to translate this sentence. 1 second. Okay. Okay. Check. See, 1 second. Let me change something. Moderator. Okay. So we have زيد طالب علم نافع من مدينة الرياض. I want you to translate that sentence. I want you to translate that sentence. Where's the vocab screen? Okay, there we go. زيد طالب علم نافع من مدينة الرياض. Okay, translate that sentence. Bismillah. These are some of the answers. Okay. A lot of different translations. Okay, let's stick with these four now. Okay. We have Zaid is a student of knowledge benefiting from city of Riyadh. Zaid is a student of knowledge, Nafi' from the city of Riyadh. Basically, this person didn't know what to do with Nafi', which is basically the problem here, right? Zaid is a beneficial student of knowledge from the city of Riyadh. Zaid is a student of beneficial knowledge from the city of Riyadh. Okay, let's focus a bit more on these two. Um, now, these are wrong, by the way. Zaid is a student of knowledge benefiting from the city of Riyadh is wrong. Benefiting uh, would be a different word. Okay, would be muntafi'un, that's benefiting, whereas nafi'un is beneficial. Okay. Um, all right, but I want you to choose between these two sentences. So I'm gonna do a poll now. Which of these two sentences are correct? Uh, 1 second. Let me copy the actual question. All right. Bismillah. And comment on it as well if you want. طيب, Bismillah. Actually, let me turn it into. I was going to change it. I can't. Okay, let's just keep it as a survey. Okay, there we go. زيد طالب علم نافع من مدينة الرياض. Is it Zaid is a student of beneficial knowledge from the city of Riyadh, or is it Zaid is a beneficial student of knowledge from the city of Riyadh? In other words, the question here is نافع. نافع, is it describing knowledge, as in beneficial knowledge, or is it describing the student, as in beneficial student? Okay, it's getting less and less. Did I give? What's happening? Some of you latch on to my explanation or my the way I broke it down. زيد طالب علم نافع من مدينة الرياض. Okay, this is basically barakallah fikum again a indication, and I'll keep on trying to make this important point, which is the importance of i'rab. This again, once again, you can see with your own eyes the importance of these harakat. These harakat in the Arabic language may play an important role. Without them, things are misunderstood. So yeah, so the correct answer is the second one, which is that nafi' is a word that explains what? The student, not the knowledge. How do we know that? How do we know that? Because nafi'un has got dhamma. Talib has got dhamma. So nafi' belongs to talib, beneficial student, not beneficial knowledge. Okay, so beneficial student of knowledge. Beneficial student of knowledge. واضح? So we have beneficial student of knowledge. Okay, so again, word order is different because Arabic doesn't have the same word order as English. Arabic goes by these harakat. So the point I was trying to make, and I'll make it again, is that as much as we have these 10 template sentences, which you can have at 4 levels of complexity, and to which you can apply different pillars to transform them into different for different objectives. Whatever sentence you're going to have is going to have internal differences within the sentence itself, depending on the attributes of the noun that you're using or the verb that you're using. What do I mean by that? For example, if the noun that you're using is feminine, then there are other words that are going to be affected by that within the sentence. If the noun that you're using is dual or plural, okay, let's say Saeed. We had Saeed Muslim, right? What if I want to get 3 of my friends accepted into the university? Saeed wa Khalid wa Ahmed bin Zayd, 3 brothers. Huh? I would say Muslimuna. I would make it plural. Judud. Jadid will become Judud. Okay? So there are words that will change if I increase the nouns and I make it high number, dual or plural. Those are the attributes of the noun. There's agreement. One thing changes, other things will be affected. Okay? And then finally, the verb. The verb could be past tense. or it could be present tense, or it could be command, or it could be whatever. So, depending again on the cues within the context, cues within the sentence, I know what I should do with that verb. Secondly, that verb itself, all the examples I gave you today, the subject was explicit, Sa'id. But in Arabic, most of the time, the actual fa'il is embedded, hidden within the verb itself. That's why the verb itself conjugates and changes form to show you um, the attributes of the fa'il. So, for example, we have aslamat, she became Muslim, that you know is Sa'idah. Aslamu, plural. Okay. Aslamna, female plural. Aslama. So, again, verb conjugation. How do you conjugate these verbs? Okay, so this is really the meat of grammar. So, how are we going to do things? Inshallah, this is how we're going to do things. We're going to cover these basic sentences in more detail, the 10 structures that we talked about, in line with the particles and how to transform these sentences. Once you get the hang of the basic sentences, then we are gonna practice agreement rules. So we're gonna take those basic sentences and we're gonna change the nouns. So today you've learned مثلا Zaydun Muslimun, and then tomorrow we're gonna have sentences that have a feminine noun. Sa'idatun Muslimatun. Okay? Once you learn all the different agreement rules at the level of a basic sentence, then we go to a detailed sentence, at which case, obviously, the agreement rules will become a bit more difficult. Okay? As in the words that affect each other, that are connected to each other, it's going to be a bit more difficult now because it's more detailed. There's more words involved. Okay? And then we go to compound, then we go to complex. So this way you can see that each stage, which is basic to detailed to compound to complex, which basically is the sections of the course, is basically has a template sentence, and that template sentence, from it we're going to create many different forms. واضح? And that basically also answers an important question, which is, Ustad, how are we going to learn this at different levels? This is basically how we're going to learn at different levels. Basically, the students in level 1, they will study some of the forms and not all of them. Like, for example, students at level 1, we're going to cover the basic, the detailed, the compound, and complex sentences because that gives you as much of the language as possible. However, let's say we're going to stick to singular nouns only. We're not going to do any plural. We're not going to do any dual, just the singular. Okay? Because again, if you get the bigger system, then perfecting the different forms is much easier. It's much easier, but you have to understand the structure of the sentence and then worry about the details. Okay? Why do I say that? I say that because even if you make mistakes in agreement rules, which you will, and most people will still understand you. And even though I sometimes give you examples like this, where the dhamma makes such a big difference or the fatha makes such a big difference, that's not always the case. Which means that if you understand the main structure of the sentence, 90% of the time you're okay. But the agreement rules are what give you the accuracy. The agreement rules are what give you what make you sound a bit more like a native, or allow you to understand more complex and more detailed and more high stake texts such as the Quran and the Sunnah, because every haraka counts. واضح? طيب, will suffice with that. It took a bit longer than I had expected it would, but of course, as you can see, it is a very detailed approach. Of course, there is a lot to be done. I wanted to share this with you to show you what's upcoming, not because today's session, the objective behind it was to actually master these things. Practice will come, inshallah ta'ala. I just wanted you to know what's upcoming. I wanted you to have the bird's eye view. I wanted you to know what approach we're going to have. And inshallah, next time, I'm going to give you specific exercises to show you how we're going to achieve everything. Because each step involved, if it comes to knowing if it's a basic, knowing the pillars of a sentence or the extras, when it comes to implementing the agreement rules, there are different exercises that will achieve that. Okay. So agreement rules, for example, the way we do agreement rules, as an example, quickly, is that you'd have a sentence in Arabic, but then one of the words will be blanked out, for example. And then you have to fill in the blank based on the context cues. In the context itself, you will see if it's a masculine noun, if it's a feminine noun, you'll see it within the context. But now you have to actually make sure it's written properly. Fill in the blank. Or, for example, we have transform a sentence. And I think that one is the most exciting, whereby you have a sentence, a specific template, and I say to you, okay, here you have an affirmative statement, make into a negative statement. Here you have a statement, turn it into a question. Here you have a verbal sentence, turn it into a request. Here you have, for example, like we said earlier, we have this sentence itself, change the subject to Sa'ida, and because of that, you have to change all the different agreement rules. These kind of controlled exercises is, inshallah, how you're going to master the different aspects. We're not going to do open exercises that are just completely, with no boundaries. La, we're going to address each thing separately. And inshallah ta'ala, each question is going to be designed in such a way that your answer to it will be a direct measure of your knowledge. As in, it will be directly tied to the learning objective. So that if you get it right, you know that you've mastered and you know this. If you get it right multiple times, of course. If you get it wrong, you know what you need to work on. So each question will be tied to its learning objective. So right now I'm working on, which probably is going to take a long time, is that I'm trying to put all these learning objectives in order. Today we have the outline, but of course there's a lot of detail involved, detailed steps, but this is like the map. We're going to go through this map, inshallah ta'ala. Hopefully this is a completely new approach of approaching grammar, inshallah. And as you can see, the idea behind this approach, and hopefully what makes this approach more useful, is that it is very practical. Very practical. Grammar and meaning. We keep the connection strong between grammar and meaning. We don't want to be studying things that are too theoretic. La. Everything that we learn in grammar is like, okay, what am I going to do with this? What's the purpose behind it? What's the objective behind it? What do I get if I am able to change this sentence from this to that? Well, what's the point behind it? Or this text that I'm reading, yes, why did he use this particle? What meaning is he trying to get across by using this particle? واضح؟ بارك الله فيكم. نعم. أستاذ, unrelated, how are you reviewing the job applications going? Will we be getting the outcome soon? طيب, let me then a few disclaimers quickly. First, of course, like, subscribe, and comment, inshallah ta'ala. And regarding the job applications, I did not have the chance yet to go over it, of course. I mean, we do have like a short list, which inshallah we're gonna email out soon, but I didn't get to the final list yet. We'll work on that, inshallah. Which brings us as well to an important point, very important point, which is barakallah fikum. Of course, this program was meant to qaddara ma sha fa'al finish a long time ago. So it's a bit being dragged on because of some delays, because of sickness and all sorts of things. So we were hoping that by now we would have launched Upskill Arabic and the subscription model, which would have allowed us to keep the work self-sustaining. But this moment in time, we're in a predicament whereby we haven't launched Upskill Arabic yet. There's still a lot of work to be done. So we need your support. So inshallah, make sure you support the initiative, inshallah ta'ala. Those who have supported so far, may Allah ta'ala reward you. So we need your support. I'll post the links here, inshallah ta'ala, that you can use. Because to be honest, we are in a bit of a financial issue in terms of wages and subscriptions and stuff. We even had to look for some loans because we ran out of money. And so we do appreciate your support, inshallah. I just wanted to remind you of that. We were hoping, of course, of Upskill Arabic, once the website is live, inshallah, it will be affordable, but at the same time, it will allow us as well to be sustainable because, as you know, we are not funded by any outside source. Everything is in-house. Everything is by ourselves. So the job applications, we are going to go through them. We're going to, inshallah, expand the team. But in order to do that, of course, we need to be self-sustainable, which inshallah is going to be the case once we launch Upskill Arabic sometime begin January, inshallah. And don't forget, don't worry, those of you that have been offered and promised a free subscription to Upskill Arabic, you'll still get it, inshallah, um, at the tier that you've been promised. Okay? Barakallah fikum. Inshallah, I'll suffice with that. Let me know what you think about today's session. Allah yahfadkum. It was difficult to try and get all of the information across. I'm sure that there are still a lot of gaps, but share your thoughts, inshallah. Still a lot of things that I want to put in place. We did not practice as much as we wanted, of course, but now, like, do share your input, inshallah ta'ala. If there's anything that you did not understand or you thought was too difficult or was unnecessary or you thought was overcomplicated, let me know, because the idea behind it was to keep things simple. Now, so do share your input, inshallah ta'ala. I feel like I achieved something today with this lesson. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. I mean, to be honest, we haven't even started yet. So going back to a little, why couldn't we have interpreted the compound sentence alias as though visited Sa'id was the repeated element that was just eliminated from the first sentence? And then translated as Khalid visited Sa'id at home and Khalil visited Sa'id at the hospital. We couldn't have interpreted it as a compound sentence because in order to make sure that the second word is an object of the verb itself as well, that word has to have fatha, which shows that it's an object. If it doesn't have a fatha, it shows that it's not an object of the verb. If it's not an object of the verb, then it can't be a compound sentence. They are two separate sentences. That verb does not affect that other word. If it did, it would have had a fatha, if you know what I mean. Anyway, a lot more to come, inshallah ta'ala, don't worry. Type, do we have? Felt happy over understanding things being said, super comprehensive and beneficial. Very informed and concise for the amount you covered. I mean, it was long. I'm not gonna lie to you. It was long, but there was a lot to cover as well. So, alhamdulillah. Anyway, those of you that watched all of it, alhamdulillah. Those of you, I mean, like I said, soldiers you are. Those of you that hanged around. If not, inshallah, the recording is there. You can access it anytime, inshallah. Okay. طيب, inshallah, we'll suffice with that. Barakallah fikum. Again, like I said, it's not the end all. This was just an overview. Everything that we've covered, everything we talked about itself is a lesson of itself that has its intricacies and its explanation and its exercises. So don't worry about that. We'll get there, inshallah. A 5 minute break would work well. Wallahi, I always think about 5 minute break, but then every time I think about giving a 5 minute break, I think the lesson will finish in 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, what's the point of 5 minute break? I'm about to finish, but then it just goes on. Simple for my level, but for those at level one, it might have been a bit difficult. Yes, if you're at level one, especially if you have never learned grammar before, then this might be a bit dense. But again, like I said, that's one of the struggles of trying to cater for a wide audience. But inshallah, like we said, once we do the grammar challenge, each session is going to be specific for each level. So we'll make sure that we dumb it down and we bring it down and we simplify it to make it suitable for people at that level, inshallah. Then again, once again, like, subscribe, comment, support. Jazakumullah khair. We'll suffice with that, inshallah. Hayyakumullah. Hayyakumullah. طيب. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How would you suggest for someone who has recently started the challenge to catch up? Just stay with the pack for the grammar challenge. You can catch up the vocabulary challenge either along the way if you have extra time, or you can catch up later, inshallah. For now, just make sure you keep your head above water. I won't be teaching, at least for another few days, to rest and get my hand back up to speed. So that gives you some more time to catch up as well, inshallah. Hayyakum Allah. Assalamu alaikum.